Raipur. The train carried him to Raipur. Ram's ways are mysterious. So he did not know why Ram had brought him to Raipur, since it is not a place of pilgrimage. After taking his midday meal in the company of a sadhu kindly provided by Ram, at the suggestion of the Sadhuram, they went to a beautiful garden of the place. Here, after bathing in the water of a canal, Ramdas spread a small deer skin he was carrying with him under the shade of a tree and laying himself down upon it, had hardly closed his eyes when someone lightly shook him by the shoulders. Opening his eyes, he discovered a young Mohammedan beside him. "Excuse the disturbance, sir," said the young friend in Hindustani. Ramdas now sat up and inquired what he wanted. "I have come to have a chat with you. I want to know if you have faith in Muhammad," inquired the young friend. "Why not? He is one of the greatest prophets of God," replied Ramdas. "Why do you say one of the prophets? Why not the only one?" put in the Muslim friend. "Young brother, although Muhammad is a world teacher, there are others also who are as great teachers. For instance, Buddha, Jesus Christ, and Krishna, and in our days, Mahatma Gandhi. If you would try to understand the message they deliver to the world, you would find that in the essentials they all agree and hold out the same goal to mankind." The words produced a deep impression upon the mind of the Muslim friend. The conversation continued for some time with regard to Ramdas' experiences, etc. The young friend became very fond of him so much so that he made up his mind to follow Ramdas wherever he went. It was a sudden impulse. Ramdas told him that he should not do so, as he had no orders from Ram to take him with him. After some persuasion, he was induced to give up the idea. But he wanted something from Ramdas as a memento. Ramdas told him that he was quite willing to give him anything he had with him, that he had only to ask for what he wanted. The kind friend then asked for the deer skin, and it was at once handed over to him. He said while receiving it, "My object in having this skin is to performed by namaz, prayers to Allah sitting upon it, and it will also remind me of you every time." At parting, he asked Ramdas where he was going next. He replied that Ram intended to take him to Ajmer. "Well, that is good," said the friend. "When you are there, please don't fail to pay a visit to the famous Muslim shrine, the Khaja Pir. Any Musliman can show you the way to it." These were prophet words. In due course, he reached Ajmer. It was night. While he was resting in the station, a policeman interfered and drove him away, knocking about along with some other sadhus who had also arrived by the same train. The railway police objected and asked all of them to go out. He sought a place under a tree in front of the station, within the compound. But here again the policeman interfered and drove him away. knocking about for some time. He saw at last a spot under another tree in a far off corner of the railway compound. As he had nothing to spread on the floor, he lay himself down on the bare ground. When his nose came in close proximity with the ground, he felt the strong smell of urine. "O Ram, how kind you are! You make your humble slave pass through every kind of experience, all for his good." This condition taught him further still what a folly it was to make much of this perishable body, and it also tended greatly to make him find his true level, which is indeed very, very low. To afford him the benefit of this experience, O Ram, thou alone appeared as the policeman and brought about this circumstance. Here Ramdas, the child of Ram, slept soundly till morning in the loving embrace of that all powerful being Ram. Ajmer. At daybreak, he directed his steps towards the city. When he was going through the thickly populated streets of Ajmer, knowing not where he was being led, he was always engaged in the contemplation of Ram. A tall and stout Mohammedan stopped Ramdas and made a sign to follow him. He had no choice in such matters. He always thinks that all calls are from Ram. So, without any hesitation, he obeyed the Mohammedan guide, not knowing nor caring to know where the friend was taking him. They walked through the streets for nearly a mile and at last stopped at an arched gate. The friend entered closely followed by him. After passing through a courtyard and on descending some flight of steps and then going through a doorway, a beautiful masjid came into view. Going in here, he found himself in front of a huge silver mandap or tabout, domed and curved picturesquely. "This is Kaja Pir," exclaimed the Muslim friend. "Kneel down here and enlist yourself as the Chela of Muhammad." At once Ramdas knelt as bidden by him in all reverence. Then looking up to the kind friend, he said, "Brother, there is no need of his enlisting himself here as Muhammad Chela, because he has already been a Chela of Muhammad. O Ram, O Muhammad, how wonderful are thy ways!" In fulfillment of the fervent wish of that young Muslim friend of Raipur, thou hadst brought Ramdas on a visit to the sacred shrine of the Mohammedans. All glory to thee, O Ram, O Muhammad. Leading him out of this holy place, the Muslim friend left him on the main road. Soon after this, he was taken up by a sannyasi named Swamy Ramachandra, a man of pure and tender heart. He became greatly attached to Ramdas and undertook to look after him in every way. "O Ram, how can thy ignorant slave understand thy ways? He knows only this much: thou art all kindness, all love." First, the Swamiji inquired in the bazaar for an Anakshatra, and having received the information and got 2 meal chits, took him there, and after finishing meals, led him to a rest house where he shared his meager bedding with Ramdas in spite of his remonstrances. His kindness to the poor slave of Ram was indeed unbounded. O Ram, it is thyself who appearest in the form of these guides to lead, feed, and take care of thy slave. Why, for that matter, Ramdas has now come to look upon all human beings, all creatures, all life, all things as nothing but the manifestation of the divine Ram, whom he is meditating upon day and night. The Swamiji and he remained in Ajmer for 3 days and then left for Pushkar Raj, travelling on the hill for about 5 miles. They reached a large natural reservoir of water, on one side of which were erected temples and dharmashalas. The Swamiji and he occupied one of them. Here Ramdas spent 5 days in bhajan of Sri Ram. Swami Ramachandra had to stay in Pushkar Raj for some days more. So Ramdas, at Ram's command, left the place alone for Ajmer, where he secured the company of a sadhu, prevented from travelling by train by Ram's will. They walked for about 16 miles and then got into a train. The Sadhuram, who was complaining of indigestion at Ajmer, recovered his health completely by this walk of 16 miles, receiving on the way very little food. Ram does everything for the best. At a junction named Mekshanam, the sadhus met another sannyasi at whose suggestion they accompanied him to a station called Dharmaburi, where alighting they walked straight to the ashram of a sadhu residing near the mandir of Mahadev. The sadhu gave a hearty welcome to the guest and provided them with accommodation, food, etc. Ramdas was pressed to remain in that ashram for some days, but as the sadhuram could not do so, he left the place after a stay of 2 days and proceeded on his journey. A week passed in this ashram when 2 sannyasis from a neighboring village came there on a visit and took him to their ashram, which was in a jungle. He remained in this jungle, which he found best suited for Ram Bachan. The sannyasis were very kind to him. In this jungle, there was a small mandir of Narahari. The interior of this mandir was a perfect square, the sides corresponding exactly to Ramdas' height, except for 1 or 2 hours of sleep in the night. He was repeating the whole night the glorious mantram of Sri Ram. Here he proved for himself beyond all doubt that Ram protects with the greatest care the devotees who entirely trust him and solely depend upon him. The jungle was infested with wild pigs, serpents, scorpions, and other venomous creatures. Every night, a herd of about 20 to 30 wild pigs would surround the mandir, the door of which was always open. The wild animals would come to dig out roots with their snouts from the marshy land surrounding the mandir, for these roots were their food. Ramdas was freely going out in the nights when they were about, but by Ram's grace they never harmed him. The villagers who were coming there during the day would warn him of the ferocious nature of these wild beasts. But complete trust in Ram means full protection and no fear. Moreover, day and night the mandir was freely visited by long black serpents, none of which, however, molested him. Again every morning, which he lifted up the gunny or sack piece spread for him by the kind sannyasis as asan or seed, which Ramdas would use also for a bed at night, he would discover beneath it a number of reddish yellow scorpions. None of these stung him. O Ram, when thy loving arm is ever ready to protect thy humble slave, who could harm him? Thou art, O Ram, everywhere, in all creatures, the whole universe and all in it is thy own manifestation. O Ram, all glory to thee. Ramdas, by Ram's command, remained in this jungle for about a month and a half. The afternoons were mostly spent in the society of cowherd boys who would come to this forest for grazing cattle. They would play upon flutes and him gave him the pleasure of listening to their sweet music. These boys appeared to him as so many cheerful, active little Krishnas. By Ram's grace, the stay there proved altogether a most delightful one. On one occasion, the kind sannyasi friend took him on a visit to a village several stations away from Dharmaburi, the name of which is Yadavpur. Here there was a great congregation of sadhus. There were in all about 200 in number. It was a feast of satsang. The beauty of it all was to observe the unstinted hospitality of the villagers. Every article of comfort which they possessed was at the disposal of the sadhus. One day Ram's command came to Ramdas to move on. Accordingly, he left the jungle against the wishes of the sannyasis, who wanted him to remain for some months more. Ram passed him on to the care of a merchant at the railway station, who undertook to escort him as far as the merchant travelled. An incident that took place here requires to be related now. Next. Money is the root of all evil. When the merchant and Ramdas were entering the train, there was a heavy rush of passengers, and so the merchant had to push his way in the thick of the crowd in order to get into a carriage, which he did, followed by Ramdas. He had scarcely settled himself down on a seat when the merchant friend came to him and informed, Maharaj, somebody has robbed me of my leather purse containing 15 rupees and the railway ticket. And he showed his waistcoat pocket, the inside lining of which was found to have been neatly cut out for the removal of the purse. It must all have been the work of a few seconds. The merchant continued to say, Now, what shall I do? I have neither ticket nor money. May I report the matter to the railway police? The train was about to start. Since you ask for his advice, said Ramdas, he requests you to keep mum over the affair. No good fretting or making a fuss over the matter. As regards the ticket, You may travel to your destination without one, on the way or at the alighting station. If the ticket is demanded of you by the railway officers, you can explain to them the way how you lost the purse and the ticket. As a proof of this, you may show them the torn vest pocket. This advice of humble Ramadass did not satisfy the merchant. He could not rest content until he reported the matter to the railway police. Now a police officer came to the compartment and commenced teasing many poorly dressed and unassuming sadhus, compelling them to hand over their bags and bundles for inspection. Not finding anything with them, the policeman's attention was next directed towards a group of simple dressed villagers whose big turbans were all pulled down and their coats and clothing rummaged. On the person of one of them was at length discovered a sum of 20 rupees. This man was now asked by the police a number of sharp as and suspicious questions as to how he came in possession of the money. He explained that he was only a keeper of the amount belonging to all the friends of that group. By this time, the merchant friend who was looking upon the inquiry set on foot by him had got disgusted with it all and was in a penitent mood, because he saw that many innocent people were being harassed for the sake of his loss. The money found upon the villagers and their tickets also were wrested from them and kept by the police, and were only returned to the owners after they had passed several stations. Meanwhile, the innocent caused a great deal of annoyance and anxiety. Now the merchant came to Ramadass and giving him a namaskar said, Maharaj, fool, that I was not to have listened to your golden advice. Behold, what a mess I have made of the whole matter. To how many innocent men I have caused pain. Pardon thy slave. Pray, shew pardon of Ram. O friend, was Ramadass. Only reply. By this occurrence, Ram taught Ramadass was a beautiful moral that he should not commit at any time the blunder of carrying or owning money, which means nothing but trouble and mischief. Rightly, it is said, money is the root of all evil. Next, Junagadh. Now the train carried Ramadass to the Junagadh station. It was midday. He was without a guide. At the city gate, he inquired of a policeman if there was a Ram Mandir in that place. He replied that there was a Ram Mandir about 2 miles from the gate, and he pointed out the way leading to it. Ramadass walked on, making frequent inquiries on the way. At last, he reached the high gateway of the Ram Mandir. Entering, he was welcomed by the Mahant of the ashram, with whom he remained for about a week. Here he had the benefit of the society of 6 other sadhus who were also there as the guests of the kind-hearted Mahant. All of them were very kind to Ramadass. Ram here performed 2 wonderful miracles. One of these sadhus had an attack of fever from a fortnight, and in spite of various kinds of treatment, he was as bad as ever. He was bedridden. emaciated and pale. Besides, he was disheartened and was fretting over his illness. Seeing his condition, Ramdas could not resist going to his bed and sitting near him and offering himself for his service, began pressing his legs lightly. Coming to know of this, the ailing Sadhu sat up and remonstrated, saying that he was quietly unworthy to receive such attention from him. He only asked for a blessing from Ramdas that he should be all right by the following day. Ramdas said that he was only a humble slave of Ram and had no right to bless anybody. To bless in the name of Ram, he appealed. Well, brother, said Ramdas, may Sri Ram, the protector of all, bless you with health by tomorrow morning. That night, Ram was perhaps busy setting the sadhu right. For next morning, he was entirely free from fever and was moving about in good cheer and health. This marvelous cure by Ram, for working which he had made humble Ramdas his tool, made quite a sensation in the ashram. So he became the object of considerable attention and love from all in the ashram. About 3 or 4 days later, another sadhu fell ill. He too asked Ramdas to bless him in the same way as he had done the other one. Ramdas prayed again to Ram as requested. O Ram, what a powerful being thou art. The second sadhu also recovered by the following morning. All glory to thee, Ram. Ramdas was not made to remain in this ashram long. He met one day the same sannyasi who had guided him to Dharmaburi. He had evinced a great liking for Ramdas. Now he took him up and brought him to another ashram belonging to a well-known sannyasi, Junagadh Kashigiriji by name. In this ashram or Akkadam, as it was called, Ramdas was loved by all sannyasis. There were about 15 of them. Ram's intention in taking him to Junagadh was to enable him to scale the heights of the famous hill of Girnar, the seat of Guru Dattatreya and Mother Ambaji. He expressed this wish to Kashigiriji, who proposed also to accompany him on his climb. Ram's kindness is indeed very great. A day was fixed and one night he mounted the steps of Girnar with Kashigiriji and 6 other sannyasis who were also in the party. The total number of steps to be mounted in order to reach the summit of the hills was about 9,000. 6,000 steps were recovered and they reached at about 3 after midnight the ashram of a sannyasi whose name was Shankar Girji. Here a halt was made for the night. Cold on the hill was severe. Ram was kind and his bhajan was so sweet. Next morning, the party climbed further up and reached first the temple of Mother Ambochi and thence ascending a flight of steps mounted again the highest peak among those hills. While nearing this peak, the steps were irregular and slippery, but Ram led all of safely. Here on the summit are the footprints of Guru Dattatreya. Hundreds of pilgrims are every day ascending these hills for the darshan of these holy footprints. They sit on the edge of this peak, and to have a sweeping look all around is to present to the gaze a most enthralling sight. The charming landscapes on all sides, the distant hills painted with green and yellow, the vast blue expanse of the sky overhead, and the thin silvery streaks of sparkling water streaming down the smooth and shining sides of rocks are all scenes that elevate the looker onto regions at once mystic and celestial. On getting down this hill halfway, the party visited some caves occupied by Mahatmas and had the uncommon pleasure of their society. Then were visited the various reservoirs of water on the slopes of the hills. At length they returned at noon to the hospitable ashram of Shankar Girji. After dinner, the party started on their downward journey and reached Junagadh in the evening. Next day, all the sannyasis of the party were complaining of stiffness and pain in their limbs. Some of them, for 2 or 3 days, could only hobble along. But Ram was so kind to Ramadass that he did not feel any pain or stiffness in his legs. Now Ram made him acquainted with two young friends, Mahanlal and Kantilal, both of whom conceived a great love for him. In their company, he spent a few very happy days. They would take him every evening for walks in the public gardens and among groves of trees. Once in their company, Ramadass ascended a small hill called Lakshman Tekri. They also introduced him to some Muslim friends of the place who were all very kind to him. A visit was paid to the Datar Mosque at the foot of the Datar Hills. Mahanlal made him acquainted with several friends of Junagadh who were all uniformly kind to Ramadass. Mahanlal arranged for his journey to Somnath, a noted shrine of great historical importance. Ramadass duly proceeded to the shrine in the company of a Gujarati friend who met him at the railway station by the grace of Ram. This friend, on reaching Veraval station, as arranged by Mahanlal, took him to the house of a rich merchant of the place, a relation of Mahanlal, but when Ramadass visited him, he was laid up with high fever and his whole household was in a state of acute anxiety over his illness. He sat near the sick friend and touching him on the arm, felt the high temperature. Before leaving the room, Ramadass was asked by his relatives present, as well as by the friends who escorted him to the place, to bless the patient with health. Accordingly, Ramadass said that by the grace of Almighty Ram, he would be all right next morning. Ram manifested his power here was well. The patient was entirely free from all fever next morning. He was having the attack of fever for 5 days past without intermission. By Ram's grace, now the fever having left him, he was able to walk out to his place of business. Ramadass was staying in the topmost story of his shop, a huge building. Here too, all were kind to him. he duly visited the ruins and the temple of Somnath. The underground cave in which there is the huge image of Somnath was entered and stood before the idol. Here again he felt thrills of ecstasy in the presence of Somnath. He bathed in the river a little away from the temple. Returning to Varaval, Ramdas expressed to the merchant friend, as prompted by Ram, his wish to visit Prachi and Muddi Goraknath and said that he would go on foot early next morning. No, Swamiji, said the kind merchant, you should not go on foot. I shall engage a bullock cart for you, for the road leading to these places is so rugged and rough that even a horse carriage cannot be driven over there. Moreover, you have to cover a distance of 16 miles, which is a long distance for a weak man like you walk through. Although Ramdas was against the proposal, he was prevailed upon by the friend to sit in a cart along with some other friends who were also bound for Prachi. The kind friend dropped into his pocket a small kerchief to which were tied 2 rupees for cart hire to and from Prachi. The cart started before daybreak. They had not travelled half a mile when Ramdas saw the driver beating the bullocks with a heavy stick. He, of course, could not bear the sight. He felt as if the blows were delivered on his back. He appealed to the driver not to inflict injury on the bullocks. He replied that the bullocks would not go if they were not chastised. Ram now commanded Ramdas to give up the cart at once. After paying 1 rupee, he got down and walked the distance and reached Prachi about midday. As he was proceeding, he happened to pass close to a poorly dressed man with a bundle on his back. Seeing Ramdas, he quickly moved out of the way and began walking at the other end of the road. Proceeding a little further, he met another man coming from the opposite direction and both greeted each other with Ram, Ram. After going a little further, Ramdas questioned him why he was moving so far away from him, to which he replied that he was a pariah. Oh, but you are Ramdas, brother, all the same. So saying, Ramdas approached him and took him by the hand. He stared at Ramdas in confusion. I am a dead by caste, he again said. Ramdas is your brother, repeated Ramdas. A man who has the name of Ram on his lips is superior to a Brahmin in the eyes of Ram. All are equal. Until he parted, Ramdas went on talking to him about the glory of Ram. Now he took a side track and separated from Ramdas, who then fell into the company of a Mohammedan friend, driving a horse loaded with some merchandise. This friend, whose nature was simple and childlike, gave him much pleasure by his society until Ramdas reached Prachi. Bathing in the large tank into which a river was flowing, he visited several mandis, met 2 sadhus of the place, and then started on his return journey and reached in the evening the shrine called Muddi Goraknath. Here he remained for a night in the society of the sadhus of the temple, which is also a cave. entrance to which can only be gained by descending a number of stone steps. Starting from there, early next morning, he reached Veravel in the forenoon. The first thing he did was to return the balance of 1 rupee to the merchant. He had walked all the way with enthusiasm, repeating according to this wont the sacred Ram Mantram. The following day, he went back by train to Junagadh. Mangal Lal and Kanti Lal heartily welcomed him back. They pressed him to remain in Junagadh for some days more. He agreed to do so by Ram's will, provided he was allowed to remain in solitude, where he could spend his days in entire devotion to and meditation of Ram. Accordingly, Ram himself pitched upon a place called Mukkandishi Ashram. This is situated right in the midst of a dense jungle over a hill on the way to Girnar, about 4 miles from Junagadh. There is a temple here in ruins, besides a number of samadhis in a neglected condition. The place has consequently a weird appearance. Thank you.